Welcome to the Gameday716 podcast. Coming at you with a quick show tonight just to preview the Buffalo Bills Washington football team game for tomorrow. Going to go over some keys to the game, things that I think that we need to see from both the offense and the defense in order for the Bills to walk away with a victory, as well as some things that I think Washington might throw our way a little bit differently from the first two games of the season. So I think for starters, what we'll do is we'll touch on Josh Allen and the offense and some of the things that they're going to have to do in order to overcome the Washington football team pass rush. The pass rush has been iffy at times for Washington. We know that they have some all pros on that defensive line, some young guys that are capable of rushing the quarterback and causing havoc in the backfield. I think our front five, though, I think our offensive line is going to hold up pretty well against their defensive front, mostly because I think that the offensive line is starting to gel. I think we saw signs of that in the Miami game last week. As compared to the week one matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers, in which our offensive line was manhandled all day long, to say the very least. So without further ado, I want to jump over to some of the stats that the Bills offense and the Washington defense currently have with one another. First, the Buffalo offense, who is at this point got 685 yards of total offense through 2 weeks, which is not world burning by any means, but they've done what they need to do on the offensive side of the ball to be 1-1 going into week 3 of the season. From Washington's defense standpoint, they've allowed 815 yards. What that tells me is the Washington defense is going to give up some yardage from the Buffalo Bills. And if there was ever a week for Josh Allen and this offense to get right and to start clicking on all cylinders, this would be the week, especially heading into next week when we face another young quarterback with the Houston Texans before eventually going into week 5 against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that's the game that everybody has circled on their calendars at this point. I think the Buffalo Bills included, not just the fans, coaching staff too. I think that's the big one. I think that's in order to get the 1 seed in the AFC, I think you have to go through Kansas City. In order to do that, you need to be firing on all cylinders. So the Bills need this game desperately to get themselves back on track. We saw signs of the running game being really efficient in the first 2 weeks of the season. Now, once, not if, but once the passing offense catches up to the rushing offense, this could be a really difficult team to face in the second half of the season, especially if the defense continues to play the way that they have. Speaking of the Bills' defense has only allowed 29 first downs through 2 games. 6 of those have come through rushing, 18 have come through passing, and the other 5 have come because of penalty. They're only allowing 12 out of 30 conversions of third down conversions and 0 for 4 on fourth down conversions. So all 4 times the Buffalo Bills defense has been faced with a fourth down, they've absolutely run roughshod and made sure to get the ball back for the offense. They've only allowed 468 yards through 2 games. And I think that's one of the strong points going into this game is the Bills defense. The Bills defense probably going to hold Washington to, I'd say, probably between 10 to 17 points maximum, meaning that the offense doesn't need to necessarily be prolific going into this game. They very well need to be, just again for that consistency and to see them really fire on all cylinders before we get to the Chiefs. But by no means do we need to put up 35, 40 points in order to win this game. But that is something that we all would like to see. Rushing, the Bills defense has only allowed 146 yards through 2 games. That's an average of 73 yards a game, a vast improvement over where we saw this rushing defense last year. I think a lot of that has to do with Starr coming back into the mix, as well as some of the young guys. Greg Rousseau has been pretty nice in run defense in the run plays that he's been a part of in his snaps. They're only allowing 3.6 yards per carry average as compared to the 4.7 that the Buffalo Bills rushing attack is getting. So when you look at it from that standpoint, Buffalo has the edge there as well. Washington's defense, to jump over to there for a minute, they have allowed 253 yards rushing through 2 weeks, which is much different than the 146 that the Bills defense has allowed. So I would expect a healthy dose of the Bills running game to be utilized here to really soften up the box and bring those guys forward and try to give our receivers enough time to gain separation. if the defensive front of Washington starts to cause problems for Josh Allen and the offensive line, I'm very much so expecting to see Brian Dable incorporate a little bit of 11 and 12 personnel into the game plan, just to get those tight ends on the offensive line to help chip away at defensive ends coming in. And this is probably going to be the quickest way to deal with that. Their secondary is suspect. So if you can beat their pass rush and you could hold them down and ensure that Allen has a clean pocket to scan the field, survey his options, and to fire that ball all over the field, I think that this is going to be a 300 plus yard passing game for Josh Allen if we can hold up on the offensive line. One of the other things that seems to be creeping its way into the Buffalo Bills offense is, like I said, some of that 11 personnel stuff. We saw a little bit of it in week 2, way more so than we saw in week 1. For anybody that caught the episode earlier this week with the three of us doing a roundtable, that's one of the things that we touched on. I would anticipate that they learned their lesson from week 1 and the offensive line struggled. They got back into form by week 2. But heading into week 3, we really need to see those guys take a step forward because the pass rush of Washington is much, much more lethal than the pass rush of the Miami Dolphins. So different beast entirely coming up here tomorrow. And the Bills offensive line is going to have to be ready for that. And I'm sure Brian Dable is going to do everything he can to put the guys in position to where they are going to be most effective. And I think running some 11 and 12 personnel stuff, like I said, is going to be one of the remedies to a pass rush. Now, if the Bills offensive line, the 5 starting offensive linemen are able to hold it down and really keep the Washington football team defensive line from causing any issues, well, then you don't have to run that. You could run, 4 wide and just spread things up and just completely pick apart that Washington secondary. You give Josh Allen at least 2.5 to 3 seconds. I think that there's going to be a pretty high scoring game for the Buffalo Bills offense in this game. Passing yards wise, a Washington football team has only allowed 562 passing yards through 2 games. So just north of 280 yards per game, whereas the Buffalo Bills defense has only allowed 322 yards through 2 games, which is an average of about 160. Saying that, I think that it stands to reason that the secondary of the Buffalo Bills are going to be able to contain Tyler Heineke and ensure that his playmakers, mostly Terry McLaurin, don't have the opportunity to keep this game close. I think if Buffalo comes out to an early lead of 14 or more points by the end of the first quarter, I think we're going to see a lot of what we saw in week 2 against the Miami Dolphins, where the offense just continues to put the pedal to the metal, whether it's through the running game or the passing game. Run up that score a little bit going into halftime. You don't want to go into halftime with only a 10-point lead. We saw what happened in week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers when that was the case. So we want a nice, comfortable lead heading into halftime. But I don't think that there's any reason for anybody to really fear the Washington defense, especially the secondary. The pass rush, again, as long as the offensive line holds their own and does what they're supposed to do, I don't see any issues that the defense is going to cause for the Buffalo Bills offense. Sack-wise, the Buffalo Bills have 8 sacks on the year, whereas the offensive line has allowed 4 sacks so far. The Washington football team has gotten 6 sacks so far, and they've only allowed 2. Just from a number standpoint, that would seem to indicate that the Washington football team offensive line is really holding their own through 2 weeks. The fact that their quarterback has only been sacked twice through 2 games is a testament to how strong that unit is playing so far in the early portions of the season. But I would anticipate that they haven't seen anything like the Buffalo Bills pass rush yet, besides what we saw from AJ Epinesa and Greg Rousseau last week against the Miami Dolphins. I think we're going to see more of that this week. I don't think that the Washington football team offensive line is going to be able to really stop the defensive front of the Bills in this matchup. There's just too much speed and length on the ends of the Buffalo Bills defensive front for anybody to really to contain. And unless they run some 11 and 12 personnel as well and really keep a tight end in there to chip away and be a 6th lineman, so to speak, I think they're going to have a long day trying to keep the likes of AJ Epinesa, Jerry Hughes, Greg Rousseau, and Mario Addison from getting to the quarterback. And if we can get him rattled early in the game, I think that bodes well for the chances of the secondary having a pretty successful day turning the ball over. Right now, I'm probably going to say that the Bills defense is going to come away with at least 2 turnovers. I would imagine one of those will be a fumble, one of them will be an interception. I think that's at minimum. The pressure the defensive front is going to put on that offense of the Washington football team is going to cause Tyler Heineke to want to get rid of that ball quickly. And if we try to play a little bit closer press coverage against these guys, and really try to stick them at the line, mix in a little bit of man with our zone just to give them a different look. I think that the secondary is going to be really successful. Once again, limiting the passing yards of the opposing offense like they have through the first 2 weeks. Just to reiterate, the Buffalo Bills secondary has only allowed 322 passing yards through 2 games. There's at least a third of the defenses in the NFL right now that have allowed about that much in just a single game. The fact that the Buffalo Bills defense has only allowed 322 through 2 games is, I think, a sign of how strong the entire defensive unit is playing. And again, I don't see any reason to think that that's going to change heading into this matchup with the Washington football team. Let's go into a little bit of a rushing game, though. I want to talk for a second about what Devin Singletary and Zach Moss brought to the table in week 2 against the Miami Dolphins. Devin Singletary scoring a touchdown, Zach Moss scoring two different styles, some similarities in their game. They both have the ability to be shifty, obviously, with Singletary being the more shifty of the two. But when you need, a 3rd and 1 picked up, or you're at the 3-yard line, you really need to get the ball into the end zone. Zach Moss is really emerging despite the fumble last week. He turned it around from there and went on to score those 2 touchdowns. And I think it goes to show that Zach Moss is going to be your battering ram when you need that short yardage, that 3rd and 1, even that 4th and 1. Preserve Josh's body until we get later in the season into the playoffs, and he has to put it all on the line. Let Zach pick up those difficult yards that we're used to seeing Josh, do a QB sneak on 4th and 1, or we're handing it off in past years to some of those bigger backs. I think that's the Zach Moss role. And if he excels at it, like I think that he's going to, this could be a really nice 1-2 punch as we head into the later parts of the season, especially in those playoff games where defense and running game really become the standout of what separates the teams that are going to be 1 and done or 2 and done, and the teams that are going to make the conference championships and eventually the Super Bowl. Last year, we saw a prolific offense go up against Tom Brady and that Tampa Bay defense. And that Tampa Bay defense really limited what Patrick Mahomes was able to do. And I think that in week 3 here against the Washington football team, we're going to see a lot of that similar style of play to what Tampa Bay ran against Kansas City. I think we're going to really start to see some of those concepts incorporated defensively as we start edging a little bit closer to that week 5 matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's going to be huge. And to piggyback off of what we were talking about earlier this week about the Bills offense seemingly running completely to the left without going all the way back into that again, I really do think that it's a plan to get better at what they weren't good at last year. The stats showed last year that Josh Allen was far more efficient in the right side of the field, whether it's short, intermediate, or deep routes. Same thing with the middle side of the field, where he really struggled was on the left side, intermediate to deep. And it seems to me through 2 weeks, looking at the next gen stats, that a lot of the route concepts that the Buffalo Bills are running are going to the left side of the field in the very areas that he struggled with last year. And I don't think that is a coincidence. I think that's very much so by design to, one, not show all your cards, not show Kansas City before week 5 what the Buffalo Bills offense can do, showing them maybe some of the weaknesses that we had last year as far as the passing attack was concerned, which, there were very few weaknesses with the passing attack last year. But if there were any criticisms to make, I think it would be that intermediate to deep left side of the field throws by Josh Allen. And we were seeing him not really connect on those so far this year, but he's trying them and almost exclusively to the left side. And I think that's a little bit symbolic of what the Bills are trying to do offensively the first month of the season as they get ready for that week 5 matchup against Kansas City Chiefs, because the only way you're making the Super Bowl as the Buffalo Bills is if you get through the Kansas City Chiefs. Not just once, but probably twice. You're going to have to beat them this coming up week 5 in order to have a chance at securing that 1 seed. And then you're going to see them again in the playoffs. And you want that home field advantage when you get to that point. And you want your offense and your defense to really be at their peak and to be hitting their peak right as you go into the postseason. So with that, I think we're going to see more of the play designs going to the left side of the field against the Washington football team. I think that one side of their secondary is going to have a very long day, and the other side is going to have a very boring day. I would anticipate that we're going to see a lot of safeties rolling over to that left side. We're going to see more of Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs lining up on the left. When we see Stephon Diggs line up on the right, I would imagine that we're going to see more of that right to left route concepts at work, where Stephon Diggs will start to the right of the formation. He'll hit the break of his route, and he'll end up on the left side of the field. Again, where Josh struggled last year. And I think the plan for Dable in this offense is to allow Josh the early part of the season to really find a rhythm with the shortcomings he had last season. And if he's able to do that, then when you start to incorporate all the concepts that made them so successful in the 2020 season, when they made the AFC Championship game, ultimately losing to the Kansas City Chiefs, it was a spread offense of sorts where, the route concepts were going all over the place. You couldn't really roll coverage to one side or the other, because if you rolled your coverage to Stephon Diggs' side, well, then John Brown or Gabriel Davis or Cole Beasley were going to be on the other side with enough separation for Josh Allen to have a window to throw that ball. And I just don't see how the Washington football team is going to be able to really stack up against this Buffalo Bills offense, especially when you talk about the speed and the route running prowess of the Buffalo Bills wide receivers. I'm going to say that Josh Allen is probably going to have his first 300-yard game of the season. I also anticipate the running game is going to stay just as strong as it has been. Josh, on top of those 300 plus yards passing, will also throw for 2 to 3 touchdowns while rushing for one more. I also think the combination of Devin Singletary and Zach Moss will account for one more touchdown on the ground between the two of them. Not quite sure who gets it. I guess it's going to depend where on the field you are. If you're at the 25-yard line, I'd imagine that Devin Singletary has the best chance of scoring that touchdown. If you are inside the 5-yard line, it's probably going to be Zach Moss's ball to run in there and punch in for 6. So all in all, my prediction for this game, as it currently stands, not seeing any of the inactives for the game yet, who I'm imagining is going to be more of the same of what we've already seen. The fact that they didn't call up Cam Lewis or Elijah or even Wild Goose, that tells me that they're very, very comfortable with the fact that Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace are both going to suit up for this game, despite their questionable designation on the injury report the other day. I really do think that both of those guys will be playing in this game. Otherwise, we would have seen a practice squad call up from the secondary in order to ensure that we had enough men for that position group to be able to hold it down if either one or both of Dane Jackson and Levi Wallace weren't able to go. But my score prediction. So I think that the Buffalo Bills offense is really going to bounce back here. I think Washington's going to struggle to not only move the ball, but ultimately score points. As we saw last week with the Miami Dolphins, that Buffalo Bills defense was stingy. There were times where the Miami Dolphins got the ball inside Buffalo territory, still came away with 0 points. One of those times inside the 30, they got the ball on a Josh Allen interception and a pass intended for Stephon Diggs. I think that we're going to see that again. I don't see how Washington's going to be able to stay stride for stride with the Buffalo Bills heading into this game, just knowing what kind of offense Washington's running. They really are more or less a one-trick pony. I think the combination of Hyde and Poyer in the secondary, as well as Trey White covering Terry McLaurin. Like, if you take Terry out of the game, there's not much more offensively that Washington's going to be able to do to keep up with Buffalo, even if Josh Allen doesn't have the game I anticipate him having. Even if Josh Allen plays average, I think the Buffalo Bills still win by 10 points. If Josh Allen has the game that I think he's going to have, I'm going to say that Buffalo's going to walk away with this one 38-10. And those 10 points for Washington probably going to come in the second half. Again, I strongly believe that the Buffalo Bills offense is going to come out swinging early in the game. They're going to go up early. It's going to deflate that Washington sideline. And we're not going to see Washington really have any success on offense until the second half, when the Bills defense starts to loosen up a little bit when they have a commanding lead. If it's 31-3 heading into the fourth quarter, the Bills defense is probably going to switch it up a little bit more and play even more of that bend but don't break defense as compared to what they usually do. But again, I think 38-10 is a very fair prediction here. Once again, Josh Allen going to have 300 plus yards of passing, hover right around that 60% completion rate. Don't think he's going to be at 50 again. I think he is going to improve. There were believe 14 passes last week that Josh Allen either threw away or batted down or intercepted. And of those 14 passes, if only 5 of them are actually caught instead of those other outcomes, Josh Allen's at about 65% passing last week. And we're not talking about whether or not he needs a bounce back game. We're going to be talking about how he's picking up where he left off last season. And I think a lot of what Josh Allen is struggling with right now has to come down to the fact that they're really trying to push him into these situations that he didn't succeed at last year, despite his near MVP performance in the 2020 season. There were still things that he wasn't exactly prolific at. And I think if you work on those now, early in the season, before things get really difficult as you head into December and January, when football gets cold, the elements start to play a factor, especially here in Buffalo, where the winds swirl around Highmark Stadium, unlike anywhere else in the league. And you want to be able to be playing your best football before that time comes, so that once you get to the postseason, you can really roll through it. You're firing on all cylinders, and you're playing your best ball. Your defense is stout, your pass rush is incredible, and your offense is high flying. Those are some of the ingredients to having a successful postseason run. And if you start now, especially with the things that this offense didn't excel at last year, I think you position yourself really well. You don't have to be much better than you were overall last year in order to make a deep run. But if you want to get past that AFC Championship game and you want to get to that Super Bowl, then I think what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to beat Kansas City twice. In order to beat them even once, your defense, your pass rush, your front four have to get home. You cannot send blitzers. Otherwise, it's going to be way easier for that Kansas City offense to really separate themselves from the secondary and just do what they did last year in that AFC Championship game. So I say put in the groundwork now. I think this is where we start to see Josh Allen improve on the left side of the field. Next week, Todd had alluded to the fact that maybe we see a little bit of those left to right passing concepts start to slip in when we get to Houston next week. And I think that's a really, really big possibility, especially if this week Josh Allen excels on the stuff that he didn't excel at last year. So again, we're probably going to see a lot of concepts running to the left side of the field, which probably will frustrate a lot of us. You may see Josh sail some throws. He's admitted in the last couple of days that he's been getting a little bit amped up when things aren't going his way early in games. And guys like Stefon Diggs really have to get a hold of him and bring him back down to earth and remind him that you're only as good as your next play, and your last play has to be forgotten. And you could have a bad play like Zach Moss had last week when he fumbled the ball, and you can get another opportunity, and you could either choose to run with it, no pun intended, or you could choose to cave under the pressure. And I think Josh is really succumbing to a little bit of that, which is why guys like Stefon Diggs are so crucial in their captaincy roles, because everybody on this team needs somebody that kind of keeps their head on straight. Josh Allen, he needs Stefon Diggs. And everything that I've seen and everything that's been in the media has shown us that he's been nothing but a fantastic teammate. So just a quick wrap up before I wrap this up. Like I said, it's going to be a quick one today. Just wanted to get in a little bit of a preview of tomorrow's game and throw a little bit of content out there. I think that Bills offense is going to have a fantastic day. The defense, I think we're going to see another 4+ sack performance. I would imagine that either, let's see, we'll give Epinesa a sack, even though last week he didn't show up on the stat sheet quite as much as we would have liked. Some of the hits that he delivered changed the outcome of the game. Knocking Tua out early in the game, that was huge. I think our pass rush is going to feast again. Our secondary, like I said, I think we're going to have a couple of turnovers. One probably going to be a fumble, but our secondary should have a nice time if our pass rush is getting home, especially if they're playing sticky coverage. If our secondary is playing a little bit of man, I don't want to see a lot of man. I want to see enough to get it on film and to make other teams have to game plan for it, especially a team like the Kansas City Chiefs before week 5 comes around. So again, prediction 38-10. You come back here and yell at me tomorrow night if I'm wrong. I know I'll be live tomorrow after the game. I'm not sure how long after the game, but I know that I'm sure one of, or maybe all of the guys will be joining me. We will find out. Stay tuned to the Game Day 716 Twitter channel, the Facebook, everywhere you can find the Game Day 716 content, including on YouTube. If you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. There's going to be more and more content coming out as we continue to really get this thing rolling. We are doing the one weekly show that is going to spiral into multiple shows per week now, not just for myself, but Todd, Noah, and CJ as well. But with that, I hope everybody has a great night. Until tomorrow, when the Buffalo Bills face the Washington football team, we will catch you after the game. Everybody enjoy, stay safe. If you are going to the game, please, for the rest of us, shout at the top of your lungs. I want to see false starts. I want to see delay of games. I want to see the crowd have an impact on the outcome of the game by causing penalties. Josh Allen said it best. We had the preseason, right? The preseason was a time for Bills Mafia to get back in that stadium and really find their way again and find their voices. And we did great in that preseason game. I think we were very loud in the first 3 quarters of the Pittsburgh game, but we're really going to need to bring that energy again to really hamper what a young quarterback in Tyler Heineke is able to do against the Buffalo Bills defense. But until tomorrow, I hope everybody stays safe. Hope everybody has a great night. We'll see you later. Go Bills.